Parsha Hukat. And people are probably cringing because it says part 1. This is chapter 19 of Bamidbar in our normal Bibles. But Parsha Hukat, we're going to study the whole thing because it is vitally important. In fact, if we could call a Torah portion, let there be light. If we could call a Torah portion the most important Torah portion, it would be this Torah portion. Is how important Hukat is, and our ability to grasp it is absolutely essential to our being able to move on. It's about the red heifer, which kind of looks like a red heifer. Okay, there we go. You have stages: red heifer, tabernacle, laver, altar. There's menorah and the showbread, the incense, and then ultimately it's coming into the presence of Elohim, being the house to inhabit Elohim. But it all starts with the red heifer. And if we can't grasp the red heifer and the importance of the red heifer, then we'll never really truly grasp how we move forward. We're going to take a look about midway through a little bit about the letters, because within the 22 letters of the alphabet is the entire game plan. And we're going to look at those because the letters of the alphabet also correspond to the Mishkan. Okay? They correspond to the Mishkan, and they start with the red heifer. So, very important that we understand this and grasp it. So, Parsha Hukat, part 1. Starts with, we're good? Good? Okay. Begins with, and Yahuwah spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying. Okay, now we've gone over this verse, similar to this verse, a number of times, but let's just take another look at it, just so we make sure that we get it and understand it as we move on. In the word for and spoke is vaidaber, that we've considered dabar, the root, meaning proclamations, declarations, commandments, promises, and warnings that are given to the vav. Okay? This literally says and spoke, and the vav is there to say, there's the prefix for and. But if we look at the Hebrew letters and try to understand, it's speaking to humankind. Okay? Because if we read this, it's saying, well, it's speaking to Moses and to Aaron. But we have to understand what we are about to read is to us. All right? The word le'emor, which means saying, but it also refers to something spoken from the heart. And we've considered from past studies that if you take the last letter of the Torah in Yisrael, the Lamed, and put it with the first letter of the Torah in Bereshit, the Beit, you get a word leb that means heart. Okay? So the Torah is the heart of Elohim. So in this, we get the Torah is the word of Yahuwah that contains the declarations, proclamations, commandments, promises, and warnings of Yahuwah as given to humankind. How do we receive all of these things? Well, we receive them through the word, and we receive them through the Ruach. So we've considered in past studies now that Moses and Aaron are types for the Word and for the Spirit of Yahuwah. Moses means to draw out. Moshe means to draw. We draw out of the Word what it says. Aaron means bringer of light. And it's the Ruach that enlightens us and brings us light so that we understand what we're drawing out. So we have a means of communication. So Moses is a representation of the Word. Aaron is a representation of the Spirit. So in this we can consider that these are spoken to us by and through the written word of Yahuwah and by and through his Ruach that is always in our presence. Very important that we understand that. The Spirit of Yahuwah Elohim is always in our presence. Whether we want to be intimate with that and have a relationship with that or not, Yahuwah Elohim is always present. That's what his name means. Okay? All right. So let's consider a cohesive thought from this verse, which is going to be very important in our understanding and application of the verses concerning the para aduma, the red heifer. The Torah is the word of Yahuwah that contains the declarations, proclamations, commandments, promises, and warnings of Yahuwah as given to humankind. These are spoken to us by and through the written word of Yahuwah and by and through his Ruach, his Spirit, that is always in our presence. This is going to be hugely important as we move on to the next verse. Okay, so verse 2, and this is Bamidbar chapter 19, by the way. I think I said that earlier. So, says, "This is the statute of the Torah Yahuwah has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring you a red heifer, faultless, in which there is no blemish, and upon which never came a yoke." All right, so we read this story kind of along the same lines as we read the story that, I can say story because Francois not here, along the same lines as, my wife, I suspect her of adultery. I'm going to take her to the priest, and he's going to mix dirt from the floor with some water, and if she's not telling me the truth, her belly's going to swell and her thigh's going to shrink. Why this? Okay, so it's one of those out there things. That is why we have to understand this. Maybe more than we have to understand this. Okay, we have to understand this Paleo Proto-Hebrew existed prior to the flood. Okay, this has actually been on buildings, or what's left of them, that they consider to have existed prior to the flood. There's writings on the walls and things. We go back, we would have considered that Noah would have understood this. Shem, Eber, Abraham. Okay, Moses would have most likely written Devarim in this, because remember, Moses had to write out the word itself, and he put that next to the ark. Inside was the Ark of the Covenant. This language didn't come along, this modern Hebrew that we have, didn't come along until after the diaspora. And it's a very important thing to understand. What happened to the Hebrews in the diaspora? They went from speaking Hebrew to speaking a type of Persianized Hebrew called Aramaic. Okay, Aramaic became the language of the kingdom, basically. This is actually called Imperial Aramaic, and this is what they brought out of captivity with them. So a lot of what this actually has to say is lost in the translation of this. And it's interesting that a lot of what we read in the Talmud describes these letters as having been the ones used in the Exodus, because it talks about Elohim, for example, taking the letter Samek and or making it so perfect that he actually, inside of it was actually, the rock was actually floating. Okay, stuff that we get from the Talmud. But we're going to talk about this in just a minute, because it's very important to our understanding of the red heifer, because this corresponds to this, and this wonderful outline, this wonderful parsha of Hukat is going to tell us a lot that we need to know in order to move forward. Okay? And we'll come back to moving forward when we get to all this stuff. All right. So the first word in this verse is a bit perplexing. The first, what was in that wine? Anyway, the first word in the verse is interesting. We have the word zot. Those little candies that are filled with the fuzzy stuff. And you remember zots?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, but it's not that zot. Zot can mean this, but it also means this one, which indicates that this statute that we are about to look at stands alone. Now we're going to back this up in a minute. The statute that we are about to look at stands alone. There is no other statute like this statute. Okay? There are many statutes in the Torah, but this one stands alone. I mean, we got statutes about not eating pork. We have statutes about not mixing wool and basically not wearing polyester, right? Not mixing wool and linen. Okay? Next, we consider the phrase, Yahuwah has commanded, saying. So in past studies, we've considered the name Yahuwah to us to give us a meaning of every aspect and every moment of our existence. Remember, names in Hebrew really don't have any meaning. Water break. L'chaim. It's the roots that make up those names that give us the meaning. And in this name of our Elohim, we have the root chaya that means to exist and to exist in the future, and the root yichye that means to have existed in the past. So the name represents every aspect of existence at every moment that existence takes place. Okay? The word for saying is again le'emor, so we've considered to illustrate according to the Torah of Yahuwah. The word that we really need to take to heart in this phrase is the word for commanded. Okay, I wrote commandment, but commanded, which is to siua. Siua. I have trouble with that zadi sometimes. Ziua comes from the root zawa that also means to take charge of, as well as to be given charge of. This word also means to be joined to. So what we have to grasp from these two phrases is that we must take charge of and be joined to this one statute in agreement with the Torah in every aspect of our lives at every moment that we live. It's going to be a very important concept that we're going to consider in a minute. Again, we must take charge of and be joined to this one statute in agreement with the Torah in every aspect of our lives at every moment that we live. This idea will be very important considering the para aduma, the red heifer. Now this is spoken to the children of Israel. It says, Daber al bnei Yisrael, in which we have to consider these proclamations, declarations, commandments, promises, and warnings are directed towards those who are restored and established by and through the authority of Elohim. We've talked about Bnei Yisrael in the past. Bnei means children. Yisrael, well, we know what Israel means. Okay, but Bnei comes from a root bana that means to restore and to establish. Yisrael means the authority of Elohim. Literally it means the prince of Elohim, the Sar of Elohim. Okay? So to be restored and established in the authority of Elohim, we must be aware of these proclamations, declarations, commandments, promises, and warnings as they are directed towards us. Okay? In this concept, the phrase that they bring you a red heifer, faultless, in which there is no blemish, and upon which never came a yoke, takes on a very critically important role. But before we can consider that phrase, we have to consider an idea from Rashi concerning the first phrase. This is the statute of the Torah Yahuwah has commanded. The word that is used for statute in this verse is hukat. Okay? Hukat is a word that refers to something prescribed. More importantly, it means a specific decree. Okay? Basically what this is saying, this is a one-of-a-kind decree. Okay? Because we mix zot into this. That means what? This decree stands alone, and this is a specific decree. We have to be very aware of what this decree means, because it's going to be very important in the role that this red heifer plays to allow us to get inside the gates so that we can approach the tabernacle. All right? All right, so Rashi, Rashi's got a lot of good things to say. Rashi has some things that are way out there sometimes. But this is an interesting comment that he had to say about this particular Torah portion. It says, because Satan and the nations of the world provoke Israel, saying, what is the meaning of this commandment to you, and what is the reason? It is a decree about which you have no right to speculate. So, not only is it a decree that stands alone, it is a specific decree, and it is a decree in which we cannot argue. We have got to be aware of what this decree says and what it means to us. It becomes very important, and we're going to find out why in just a second. So as we have considered, there are many statutes in the Torah, but we have to consider that this statute that stands alone is in its own category. What we have to consider from the concept of Rashi is that our own evil inclinations, the Satan, okay, we have been, what is the word that what happens when you want the dog to do something and you give him a treat every time he does it? Conditioned. We have been conditioned to believe that there is a guy named the Satan that runs around with a red costume on and a red tail and a pitchfork, okay? The idea, Yeah, and fangs. The idea came about around the 4th century because you had to have someone in control of a place called hell. The Hebrew concept of Satan, Satan, is actually an idea, is the root of the word shetim, that means emotions that are out of control. It's the evil inclination. We all have an evil inclination. I want to do things my way. I want to have things my way. I don't care what anybody else says. I'm going to do things even though they are not in my best interest. The evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, okay, as opposed to the Yetzer Tov, which is a goodly inclination. I want to give. I want to love. I want to share. I want to be compassionate, okay? But the Satan and the opinions of the world around us, the nations of the world, provoke us to question the validity of what the word of Yahuwah says to us and what the Spirit of Yahuwah might speak to us. Think about that. We all have outside sources that influence our system of belief, that can either influence in the direction of our Elohim or they can actually separate us from our Elohim. Okay? So we can now understand the red heifer is going to be very important. Okay? Now, let's see. The Spirit. This phrase is telling us that we have no right to speculate concerning the validity of what Yahuwah Elohim has spoken to us by the Word or the Spirit, especially when our emotions are not tempered and when we are pressured by the world around us. This becomes an important concept in understanding para aduma, the red heifer. So let's take a look at the para aduma. The word para means heifer, and it's a lot nicer looking than this, okay? But comes from the roots parar, means to violate or to take of no account. And it also means to break or to be broken, which is an important definition in our understanding of the para aduma, the red heifer. The word aduma means red, but is also the root of the word Adam, meaning humankind. So what do we consider, or what do we consider in an idea that brings our humanity to nothing and violates it? How does this idea have no blemish and upon which never came a yoke? Okay? What we have to take into mind is that the evil inclination and the opinions that we allow to influence us that violate our humanity, and that out of pride we refuse to acknowledge and refuse to see the bondage in which it puts us. Okay? It represents for us the things that violate us. But it also has something else to show us. These things bind us to a different yoke. So let's hold that idea and consider another idea of this para aduma, the red heifer. What do we consider in a broken human in which there is no blemish and has not accepted a yoke that was totally consumed and that washed the world clean of its chatat? Say sin is an overrated word. That washed the world clean of its desire to stray away from Elohim. Who is that? Yeshua. The red heifer becomes a type of Yahusha. Okay? That changes us from something that violates ourselves, and that he took it upon himself to be violated so that we could be cleansed. Now we have the first part of the Aleph Beit within the red heifer. Okay? The first thing is we have might, power. Okay? It took power to enter into Beit. Now, Beit means house, but it also represents the womb of a woman. That the power entered into the womb of a woman, and Gimel is a camel that means to move forward, moved towards becoming the door. But we have to do something. We have to be willing to behold that this was a human of sacrifice. We have the Vav that represents human being. The Zion represents an axe in other drawings in the Paleo-Hebrew. It also represents a plowshare, but it also represents, this is not a very good drawing, something of hooks. Yahusha was plowed. Okay? The scourge was not, I'm just going to hit you with a little leather thing of, cattails. Yahusha, literally the Roman, I have a model that I made years ago at home. It has hooks on the end of it. It digs into the flesh and it rips the flesh away. But he had to become the man of blood outside the walls. Okay? Where did this take place? Inside Jerusalem or outside of Jerusalem? Outside the walls. Where was the red heifer to be killed? We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. The red heifer had to die outside the walls. Okay? This would bring cleansing to humankind, which is the next letter that we didn't put up here, the Samek, which represents the world. Okay? But we see that the first step in moving towards the tabernacle is that we must allow ourselves to be cleansed. Now, Yahusha did the cleansing so that we would have that fullness. But what we have to take away from this is that we also have to be willing to cleanse ourselves of anything that goes contrary to the word of Elohim in our lives. Okay? Whether it be from our emotional state of being or whether it be from whatever it is that we receive outside. Okay? And I'll go into all that in just a second. So, anyway, in the Para Aduma, the red heifer, we have a picture of Yahusha. One more thing. If we consider that there is no decree like this decree, that this decree stands alone, we can also consider that there was no human like Yahusha. Yahusha, again, also stood alone. Okay? So very interesting, the wording in this. There is no other decree like this. It's the only decree of this sort. Okay? This picture also plays a part in our understanding this verse, and we're going to consider this as we move on in the Parsha, Hukat. So for now, let's go back to this idea. Okay? This is the part of us that we have to get rid of. This is the part of the red heifer, where the red heifer becomes something that we don't want in our lives. The evil inclination and the opinions that we allow to influence us, that violate our humanity, and that out of pride we refuse to acknowledge and refuse to see the bondage in which it puts us. Okay? Let's keep that in mind. Let's move on to verse 3. And you will give her to Eleazar the Cohen, and she shall be brought forth outside the camp, and she shall be slain in his presence. We look at this, and we look at things like this, and things kind of pop out at you. Why does it name Eleazar specifically? Why not Aaron? Aaron's the head honcho. We're going to take one of Aaron's sons and leave this on him? The name Eleazar, literally Elazar, means Elohim has helped. The root of this name is Azar, that also means to protect and to surround. The word Cohen means teacher and minister. The word priest is very much overrated. The Cohens were there to minister to the people, to teach the people, to listen to the people, to, in a sense, judge the people according to the Torah. Okay? In the phrase, and you will give her to Eleazar the Cohen, we must immediately consider the importance of our first act towards becoming cleansed. We must acknowledge that it is Yahuwah our Elohim that teaches and ministers to us when we allow his presence to surround and protect us, when we become willing to surrender our evil inclination and the opinions that we allow to influence us that violate our humanity, and the pride that we refuse to acknowledge while refusing to see the bondage in which it puts us. A lot of words there. It's written down. You can read it a few times. Okay? If I want the help of my Elohim, if I want my Elohim to surround me and protect me, I have to let go of my own assumptions. I have to let go of the things that influence me, possibly in the direction away from my Elohim. Most importantly, I have to let go of the pride that I hold on to, because I don't want to let go of these things, even though they place me in a bondage, in a state of separation from my Elohim. Okay? So, the word used for and brought forth is vehotzi, that comes from the root yatsa, that means to go forth, but also to be taken out as well as to depart. And again, we have the prefix vav, meaning and, which is a representation of the flesh, our carnal side. So we can consider that the first step is to separate ourselves from our carnal side in order to allow ourselves to be fully engulfed in the presence of Elohim and to be ministered to by his Spirit. Can I fully engage a relationship and a conversation with my Elohim when I allow the flesh, I say the flesh, the evil inclination that comes with the flesh, to influence that conversation? Can I pray something that is totally outlandish based on pride? Do I understand why I'm having a conversation with my Elohim? Do I have a motive for having a conversation with my Elohim? And yes, most of us usually have a motive for speaking to our Elohim. How many times do we actually go to our Elohim simply to say thank you? Okay? And it becomes a very important concept to consider. Okay? So, the first step is to become aware of when Yahuwah Elohim shows us that we are outside the camp. I have to take the red heifer outside the camp. I have to be aware of when I am outside or separated from being within my Elohim, in which I move and live and have my existence. The second step involves the phrase, she will be slain in his presence. We must be willing to die to the flesh and our evil inclination that feeds it. This must be done outside the camp, as this state of being cannot enter into the presence of Yahuwah. This is a very important concept that we discover in the death of Yahusha in the Bezorah of Yohanan, chapters 18 and 19, which we will probably cover very soon because it's part of what we're going to look at in the red heifer. Okay? So let's move on to verse 4. And Eleazar the Cohen will take of her blood with his finger and sprinkle of her blood towards the front of the tent of the meeting 7 times. All right, well, the story's getting crazier. Now we'll find a red heifer that doesn't have any crazy colored hairs. We can look at the, do the math and figure out the statistics of that actually happening. But the idea of taking a red heifer that is perfect, no other hairs. Rabbis have gotten so excited they found a red heifer, but upon careful inspection they found a white hair, so it was no longer a red heifer. Okay? They're going to take it outside the camp and they're going to kill it. And then he's going to take the blood and he's going to sprinkle it towards the tabernacle 7 times. We have to ask, what does this mean? Okay? We have to ask that. So if we understand Eleazar the Cohen to represent Yahuwah Elohim that teaches and ministers to us when we allow his presence to surround and protect us, then we'll be able to look at the phrase, will take of her blood with his finger, from a deeper perspective. Now, the word for blood is dama. And if we look at Bereshit 9:4, it's a representation of life. Bereshit says, only flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, you shall not eat. Yahuwah is saying that the blood contains the life. So when we see blood, it represents life to us. All right? And I dropped it. I got to pick